Yesterday, the murder case of 28-year-old Thoriso Temane was postponed till next week. 6 teenagers have been arrested in connection with his killing, with police suspecting that there might be more this might be linked to gang violence. Community members gathered outside the Polokwane Magistrates Court calling for justice. A video of the murder went viral on social media, showing Temane allegedly being dragged through the streets while people pleaded for him to be released. To discuss this further, we are now joined by Vanessa Barnes, an educational psychologist, as well as Amanda Vilakazi from the Law Society of South Africa's Criminal Law Committee. Ladies, thank you very much for joining us. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
So, you know, when you first saw this incident, what was your reaction? Let me start with you, Vanessa.
Absolute shock. But, you know, my heart also really went out to the family and friends of the victim, because this was all over social media.
Yeah.
And the trauma that must have caused by having to see that.
Yeah, I mean, and that was the very difficult thing, to actually see and know that the traction came from social media and posting it on there. If it wasn't for social media, I mean, perhaps they would have got away with this. Again, let's get your reaction, Amanda.
I was quite shocked. I even thought to myself, I need to verify this to check if indeed these were teenagers, because I couldn't understand how a teenager or a child does such an act. I was quite shocked indeed.
What does this tell us about society? I mean, when we look at footage like this, when we look at incidences, brazen incidents like this, what are we becoming as a society?
I think the big thing is that we've become so desensitized to crime that it's almost become a norm for us, that violence has almost become a norm.
Yeah, and that's a very big problem, because we look at this, we click on it automatically, we watch this and we're like, gosh, what's going on in here? And it just becomes sort of another video, but it's not another video. It's another life that's been taken, and the circumstances around it are what's really worrying. You know, we don't know the motive behind it. We don't know the circumstances. But the reality is that these are children behind all of this. Let's talk to the psyche of our children, South African children. What do you believe is the issue here?
I think that it was just naughty children. They were being naughty, and in the course of being naughty, this is the incident that had unfortunately happened.
Naughty children?
Yeah. I do think at some point these were children.
I was naughty when I was a kid, but that is not naughty. This is criminal.
I'm saying,
what these guys are getting involved in is criminal activities.
Yes, it's the naughtiness resulted in a criminal activity. I mean, naughty in the sense that they found doing some naughty things fun for them. And then at the end of the day, this unfortunately said what had happened. From the social media, the things that are posted about these children, they are children that are prone to drinking and accustomed to a certain lifestyle. But as a result, they might have convinced one another, let's hit this person, we don't know what happened. Yeah. But in the process of their naughtiness, they committed a criminal offense.
Yeah.
This is just my
your opinion, obviously.
Opinion, yeah,
I mean, we know this is still, there's a long way to go in this particular case as well. And I mean, police talking to gang-related violence as well. I mean, can we look at that as an issue? Perhaps there is this behavioral pattern that is developing that is a form of gangsterism, that is a form of, you know, the way people are treated in society.
Absolutely. I mean, I think we need to look at this from 2 angles. First of all, on an individual basis, so each individual child and what their circumstances are. But as far as I understand, this happened in a rural area or an area with a lower socioeconomic status, and what begins to happen there is we see something like a mob justice, even though we don't know what the circumstances were behind that. But these people are fighting for their existence in these environments, and they often land up taking the law into their own hands.
Yeah,
as they see it.
I mean, if we look at again, we turn to social media and we see a video clip of this young boy talking and saying, "No, but my dad's a police officer. I'm going to get away with this." Again, you know, that speaks to a big problem. You know, you are the son of a police officer, hence I don't care. You know, the law's not going to affect me. You know, that again is worrying.
Yeah, I mean, it shows exactly that we are dealing with children. that only a child can think like that. You're thinking, oh, my dad is a police officer, he's untouchable. Not knowing that even the highest police officers in the land get arrested or they get touched. They say he thought his father is untouchable. It's indicative that we are dealing with someone who's not matured at all.
Well, yes and no, because bad examples are set at higher levels as well. We every day are confronted with corruption, and we are confronted with the fact that people are just getting away, literally, with murder.
Yeah,
and these are from adults, not from children. And you don't think that perhaps it is an example that's being set, and the circumstances that our children are living in, that just makes that this is the norm.
100%, but we also have to consider that the teenage brain is very different to the adult brain.
Thank you, yeah.
So they are very impulsive. They don't necessarily consider the consequences of their actions, and sometimes we even find that they lack empathy towards others, so they can't put themselves in the shoes of others, can't see further than what is happening right there in that environment, and they tend to then feed off of each other. In those kind of situations.
You know, this is not the only incident that's happened. In fact, we saw yesterday a pupil being sentenced to 10 years for the killing of a teacher. And many people saying, that's not enough. You know, these kids need to face, if they are mature enough to commit these crimes, they should be mature enough to be facing life sentences, 20-year sentences. I mean, is that fair? Is that a fair argument?
Now, it's unfortunate or fortunate that we have what we call the Child Justice Act that deals with children who offend. Children, I mean, from 10 years to 18 years. Now, the Child Justice Act says that imprisonment should be the last resort and as minimum as possible, impose the minimum imprisonment as possible. So the magistrate thereon has been guided by the Children's Justice Act, the Child Justice Act.
People asking for that to perhaps be looked into. So once a juvenile turns 18, they are then treated as an adult, correct?
Yes.
Is that how it works? So anybody below the age of 18 is still treated as a juvenile, as a child. And yet vicious acts like this, murdering, stabbing, is it fair? Should they not be treated as an adult would be?
It also goes to the what she was referring to in how children think. Now, children, we must in fact treat them as, we must look out for their best interests as provided for in Section 28 of the Constitution. We cannot treat them like adults. In terms of the Child Justice Act, a child between up to 10 years does not have criminal ability. But from 10 years to 18 years to 14 years, it's only the state that can prove a criminal ability of a child. But thereabove, the child is considered to have criminal liability. So even if they have criminal liability, they shouldn't be treated as adults, because their mind, in terms of how they think, it's not as adults. Even though they engage themselves in such criminal acts, we can't treat them as adults because they don't think like us. That is a fact.
I suppose that brings into the question of rehabilitation and whether or not these juveniles are rehabilitated enough to come back into society and not commit these crimes again.
I think
from your perspective?
That's a very good question. There is always a chance of rehabilitation, but the one thing that we really are lacking is the health sector in these environments in terms of mental health care. You know, if we're looking at the possibility of a personality disorder, for example, that's developing, that has led to this violence, then we need to consider that that child does require psychiatric care and does require some kind of therapy, whether it be a psychologist or a social worker, something along those lines. And unfortunately, we are severely lacking in those resources.
Yeah. You know, perhaps it's the consequences that need to be outlined to these juveniles. I mean, once you've committed a crime like this, your life it has changed forever. You will face, you talk to me about it. I mean, as a juvenile, and these juveniles are sentenced. Perhaps let's look at the case yesterday. What will happen? This juvenile goes to jail. They have a criminal record for the rest of their lives. Talk us through that.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, it's the consequences of the kind of offense that is committed, because these offenses are divided into three. There's your Schedule 1, the Schedule 2, and Schedule 3 offenses. Schedule 3 offenses are the most serious offenses, which murder is one of them. So with murder, if an adult would get more than 10 years sentence in a particular offense, Therefore, you look at you are being guided by the Act. You can impose a sentence, maybe 10 years or so, but as minimum as possible.
Yeah.
If an adult would get life, a child cannot get life imprisonment. They can at most get 25 years imprisonment. However, they do have a criminal record. It cannot be done away with. It is part of him. It's unfortunate that that's what it has to come to.
Yeah, and realizing there are consequences to your behavior. Just finally, if we look ahead, Vanessa, these teenagers, what does the road look like for them going forward?
Unfortunately, it's a bit bleak. If you consider their age and the fact that the majority of them, as far as I understand, are about in grade 9, we need to consider, are they going to be able to finish school? Now you're sitting with a criminal record. How do you go further than that in terms of studies, in terms of a career and finding a job? That's going to be very difficult. And the long-term implications is living with the guilt as well of what is done, should they feel that.
Having committed murder, and that's the reality. Do you see this often?
We do, yeah.
Unfortunately, this happens far too often.
Too much trauma in this country, yes.
Ladies, we have to leave it there, unfortunately. Amanda Vilakazi from the Law Society and Vanessa Barnes, educational psychologist, talking to us about these incidences that have been happening with regard to teenagers in general committing these crimes that adults are I suppose in past being accused of, but now getting involved in murder. Absolutely frightening. Let's take a break.